And on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good morning, you're watching GB News, and coming up on the political correction today. Following a wave of resignations earlier in the week, the Prime Minister announces 2 new appointments to his backroom staff.
The First Minister of Northern Ireland, Paul Givan, announces he is to step down from his role in protest against the Northern Ireland Protocol.
And on the 70th anniversary of her reign, the Queen announces that Camilla, the Duchess of Cornwall, will be known as Queen Consort when Prince Charles becomes King. That plus plenty more after the latest news.
Good morning, it's 10 o'clock. I'm Olivia Guthrie in the GB newsroom. The Queen says it's her sincere wish that Camilla, Duchess of Cornwall, becomes Queen Consort when Prince Charles becomes King. She made the announcement in her Platinum Jubilee message as she became the first monarch in British history to reach the milestone. Clarence House says Prince Charles and the Duchess of Cornwall are touched and honoured by the gesture. Meanwhile, Boris Johnson has paid tribute to the Queen as she marks 70 years on the throne today. The Prime Minister praised her sense of duty and what he calls her unwavering dedication to the nation. American podcaster Joe Rogan has apologised for saying the N-word over a number of years. It follows musicians, including Neil Young, accusing Rogan's podcast, which is funded by Spotify, of spreading coronavirus misinformation after a video compilation emerged of Joe Rogan repeatedly using a racial slur. The podcaster said it's regretful and shameful.
My sincere and humble apologies. I wish there was more that I could say, but all of this is just me talking from the bottom of my heart. It makes me sick watching that video, but hopefully at least some of you will accept this and understand where I'm coming from.
Podcaster Joe Rogan there. Culture Secretary Nadine Dorries says the government is looking into new legislation that would hold streaming platforms accountable for offensive content. It's after Jimmy Carr came under fire for what many are calling an abhorrent Holocaust joke on his Netflix special. The comedian, who's not responded to the criticism, joked about the deaths of thousands of Romani people at the hands of the Nazis. In Morocco, investigators are looking into how a little boy was able to fall into an uncovered well. Rescuers dug for several days to reach 5-year-old Rayan, but he died before emergency services could get to him. He'd fallen over 100 feet, but the well was too narrow for rescue workers to reach from above. Legendary Indian singer Lata Mangeshkar has died at the age of 92. The iconic performer passed away of multiple organ failure at a hospital in Mumbai. She'd been a cultural icon in India for almost 8 decades and was the voice of many Bollywood soundtracks. The country has declared 2 days of national mourning and she'll be given a state funeral. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now it's back to the political correction.
Good morning. You're watching GB News. On today's Political Correction, I'm joined by the wonderful Arlene Foster and Paul Embry, who joins us from home. Coming up this hour, as pressure continues to build for Boris Johnson, he announces 2 new appointments to his backroom staff.
Paul Givan announces his resignation as First Minister of Northern Ireland in protest against the Northern Ireland Protocol.
And the Winter Olympics commence in Beijing amid controversy and diplomatic boycotts. You can get involved with any of these subjects by emailing us on gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweeting us at GBNews. This is The Political Correction. This week, Rishi Sunak announced that the poorest in Britain will receive an extra £350 to help them through the energy bill crisis. Speaking in the Commons, the Chancellor unveiled a new support package aimed at families struggling to make ends meet. We have a clip of that right now.
Today, we're announcing an energy bills rebate worth £350. You'll receive that cash support through 2 different routes. First, all electricity customers will receive an upfront discount worth £200. That discount will then be automatically repaid from people's bills over the next 5 years in equal instalments of £40 a year, starting next April. Second, we will pay a council tax rebate of £150 to all households in bands A to D, which covers around 4 out of every 5 households in England.
But following his announcement, critics of the government immediately hit back against the measures, saying the proposals would not be enough for millions around the country facing rocketing costs and taxes. So the question that we're asking today is, was it enough? Arlene, what do you reckon?
Well, I mean, I was quite surprised at this announcement. Obviously, England and Wales are slightly different from Northern Ireland. We don't have a price cap on our energy bills there. We have a regulator who then decides whether what's been asked of her by the energy companies is acceptable given the circumstances. I wasn't really in favour of an energy cap at the time that it happened because I could foresee that something like this would happen, that the market would go away out of sync and then we would be in a very difficult situation. But I think, Deanna, given that it's not just energy costs that are rising, inflation is rising, the costs of food, and of course the ever-present national insurance rise in April, which is going to hit a lot of working families really hard. So I don't think it is enough, and I actually think announcing something like this only to have to pay it back at a time when probably the cost of living will be worse. I don't know. I just don't think it's a good policy. And
Paul, over to you on this. What have you made of the announcements from Rishi?
I think there's 2 aspects to this. I think there's the short-term issue of potentially millions of families being plunged into fuel poverty. As Arlene said, the impact of rising prices on family income, etc., disposable income. And how do we address that? I think we need to go further. I think we need to look at potentially a windfall tax on the oil and the gas companies in order to help those families who are going to be suffering fuel stress. There's no question about that. But I think we need to take a much longer term approach, which frankly we've been appalling at doing over recent years. I think we have phased out coal too quickly. I think we've been too slow on nuclear. I think renewables are clearly not as effective as we were led to believe they would be. That has left us hugely reliant on gas from overseas. So I think we really need to look at some seriously radical proposals. One thing I would want to do is to take the energy companies into public ownership, to take it away from the diktats of the market, and to have a properly long-term independent energy strategy. Now, that's obviously a debate that isn't necessarily, or measures that are necessarily going to help people in the short term, which is why I think we need to be doing more radical stuff like looking at a windfall tax, because the rebate is simply not going to be enough. We run the risk of millions of families being plunged into fuel poverty, and in this country, in this day and age, that is completely unacceptable.
I think my concern about it, I think it's great that something is being done by government to try and tackle this and ease the burden. But I think I have a few issues. One is that you can't opt out of this. So for potentially higher earners for whom this isn't going to hit too much, they're going to benefit from this cut and have to pay it back when they could arguably opt out of it and allow a slightly bigger cut to go to some of the lowest earners. I think that should have been slightly better thought through. But also, this is effectively borrowing, isn't it? What we're effectively saying is you can borrow against your energy bill, and then you're going to have to pay it back over 5 years, isn't it? Starting from next April. But we have no idea what the situation is going to look like next April. No. I think there's an expectation that global gas prices might come down, which seems to be the forecast, but we have no guarantee of that. So my concern is that we're just pushing this burden, kind of kicking it down the road effectively. Well, certainly what's happening in Ukraine and Russia wouldn't lead you to that determination. But, I mean, Paul makes a very good point about energy policy in the whole. I mean, at the moment, we've moved away from nuclear, we've moved away from coal. People are now not wanting to have gas as a transition fuel, which of course was to be that transition to allow us to get to net zero. People just want gas out of the equation immediately, and I think that it's just not realistic. Small-scale nuclear is something that we very much should be looking to. I know France is looking to that, albeit Germany has gone in the opposite direction. And I think you're going to see a really big discussion in Europe now around this whole energy policy and whether nuclear should form a part of that. From my perspective, it should. I think there are ways to deal with financial risk, there are ways to deal with safety concerns, and I think nuclear has to be a part of the solution to what is a real problem at the moment in relation to energy. I completely agree, and Paul, I assume you do too, because we've spoken about nuclear energy on the show before, but particularly the kind of prospect of small-scale, kind of more modular nuclear reactors.
I think it's a no-brainer. I mean, the reality is we don't have energy security. Had we been quicker to act on nuclear and recognise the benefits of it, then arguably we wouldn't have been facing the kind of situation that we're facing now. I mean, more widely, I'm as green as anybody, but you have to also be realistic about this. You can't be so green to the extreme that you run the risk of the lights going out, or that you run the risk of people being hit in a very serious way financially, or you run the risk of transitioning to a green economy at such a rate where you potentially lose thousands of jobs. So I think on the question of energy, it's been, and I think it's successive parties actually, I don't even think necessarily it's party political. I think the long-term planning over recent years has been appalling, and what we're experiencing now are the consequences of successive governments who have simply not got to grips with this properly, and at the same time as not dealing with the issue of energy security, arguably going too quickly to a green agenda. And I think that's left us in the mess that we're in now. So on the green agenda, you mentioned taxes there, Paul, in the context of a potential windfall tax on energy companies. But do you think we should be taking away some of these taxes on energy? You know, there's an awful lot of green taxes that people are having to pay, which is raising the cost of their energy bills. Is this a tax that we can all agree we should probably try and get rid of? Yeah. Well, VAT, for example, you know, we were told one of the benefits of leaving the European Union is being able to scrap VAT on energy. So yeah, I mean, look, there are various ways of doing it, and certainly in terms of reducing tax so that it assists the families at the poorer end of the spectrum. Yes, all well and good. But without something radical, I feel that it's just going to be tinkering at the edges, really. I think that we really need to now start considering the windfall tax more widely in terms of, people's wages falling in real terms, the impacts of rising prices in the economy. We need to be looking at a wealth tax to ensure that millions of families do not suffer the sort of fuel poverty and more wider financial poverty that I fear many of them are destined to suffer.
I think, Paul, as well, a lot of people thought that the Chancellor would come forward with a reduction in VAT on energy bills, and I know some of our colleagues here at GBNews were campaigning for that, Liam Halligan amongst them. But I'm wondering, is the reason he didn't do that because, of course, the Northern Ireland Protocol, here's my daily warning, doesn't allow Northern Ireland to be a part of that because, of course, we have to abide by rules from Europe in relation to VAT, and that could have been part of the problem. I don't know, I'm just throwing that out there as possibly why he went in a different direction.
I mean, I guess only he would know that. But in terms of whether or not a political consideration such as that has superseded what should be a very hard-headed decision about the impact on millions of families across Britain, I think that would be wrong. We need to go as far as we can, frankly, regardless of particular political considerations that might be affecting the government at the moment, to ensure that people are not going to be hit hard in the way that many are going to. But I accept that could well be part of the thinking, Arlene.
And obviously, we've spoken there about the kind of energy rebate, but what actually about the council tax rebate as well that's being proposed? Because that's for everyone in band A to D properties. But I think one of my concerns about this from a levelling up perspective is that the council tax bills for people in certain parts of the country, including in County Durham, are actually much higher than some of those living in band A to D properties in other parts of the country where their council tax is much lower. So as a proportion, this isn't going to help as much anyway. So I'm just not sure that necessarily we've got the approach right on this.
Do you think levelling up wasn't at the forefront of his mind when he was making that decision?
I think levelling up is always at the forefront of the Chancellor's mind. As my constituency neighbour, I sincerely hope that is the case. But anyway, you may have seen this week that former Minister Nick Gibb has become the latest Conservative MP to publicly call for Boris Johnson's resignation.
Writing in the Daily Telegraph, Gibb confirmed that he had submitted a letter of no confidence to the 1922 committee. He said that the Conservative Party must face hard truths and that his constituents are furious about the double standards following so-called Partygate.
It comes after a flurry of resignations from Number 10 staff this week, including long-standing policy chief Munira Mirza. So what happens next?
Yeah, well, what happened next, obviously last night we had a couple of announcements. Guido Hare has gone in as Director of Communications. He was with Boris in City Hall when Boris was the Mayor of London. And Steve Barclay, one of your colleagues, the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, he's now going to be the Chief of Staff as well. I'm not quite sure how he's going to manage to juggle both of those. Is that a problem?
Well, that's now two appointments, of course, that will kind of both become sort of be MPs in a sort of semi-ministerial role in the Cabinet Office, but also working in Number 10 because, of course, Andrew Griffiths as well has taken up a role. He's the first of the 2019 intake to be given ministerial status. I'm very pleased for him.
There is hope.
Really,
hope springs eternal.
Oh, gosh,
hope springs eternal.
Not for me. But I think it's going to be a really interesting twin track, and I think really does show that there is a change of approach now to really try and unite Number 10 and the Parliamentary Party, which is actually something that a lot of us have been calling for a really long time. But Paul, what have you made of it, dare I ask?
Well, how long have you got? I mean, the Steve Barclay appointment, Chief of Staff, I think is bizarre, considering that you know he's a member of Parliament himself. There seems to me to be potentially all sorts of issues there arising over what could be clear conflicts of interest between his position as Chief of Staff and also a member of Parliament himself going forward. So it would be interesting to see how that pans out. I mean, look, these resignations, I think, are very clearly being choreographed in such a way as to do maximum damage. We saw something similar, in fact, with Jeremy Corbyn during the so-called chicken coup a few years ago, where members of his shadow front bench would resign every kind of hour almost. And that was designed to create that drip effect to maximise the pressure. And I think something similar is going on. And it just does make you wonder, really, you know, when the end point is going to come, because I think it probably is inevitable. I think the difficulty for the Prime Minister is he's been seen to have committed the two, I think, worst sins in the eyes of the public. One is hypocrisy, and one is misleading people about that hypocrisy. And I just think there are lots of things that the electorate would forgive, but those two things strike me as being things that they rarely forgive. So, you know, the question really is, does the Prime Minister still have any sort of moral authority? I don't think he does, really. I think his moral authority has gone, and when that happens, I think it's just a matter of time before the Prime Minister himself goes.
Well, I think it's interesting that in Nick Gibbs' sort of piece in the Telegraph, he spoke about his inbox and his constituents, and I think all of us as MPs do take a real steer from our inbox. Obviously, has to be handled with a pinch of salt, because sometimes there are very political campaigns that come through. And certainly I've had a lot of my local Labour membership asking for Boris's resignation, which, you can appreciate. But actually, I think the thing that I found incredibly striking has been not just the number of kind of emails and calls to the office, but the fact it's people who have either never written to me before or have only ever written about very personal things. So it's less of a kind of political campaign, and it's people just being incredibly frustrated at what they're seeing. But, as Conservative MPs, we have a very careful line to tread here. One is, thoughts on the situation and how it's been handled. But one is also looking more widely at the position that the country's in at the moment, and also geopolitically looking at Russia, Ukraine. And my concern is that the length of a leadership election in the Conservative Party, it can be several months. And can the country at this point in time really sit without a proper leader for several months? I think that's something that a lot of Conservative MPs are weighing up at the moment.
And that's the balance that Conservative MPs will have to make. Plus, also, if they go too quickly, does that then allow Boris to stay in position for a further year? Because under the current rules of the 1922 committee, you can't call another leadership election until a year has passed. And I know there was some talk of changing those rules, but that's where we are at the minute. And surely May is a big moment, Deanna, for the Prime Minister.
Well, I'd say so. Of course, now that we're into the new year, people around the country, activists around the country are really gearing up for these local elections, which are so important. I mean, people kind of talk about local elections in a way that they're quite small and low key, but actually for local areas and for the actual impact that you can have on people's lives, on their day-to-day lives, they're so important, but also important for the Prime Minister and his authority as well. So I suppose a lot of people probably are thinking, let's wait until May, let's give it a little bit more time, see what the outcome is, and then move. But it's that fine line of do we act now and get it done, or do we wait and see if the Prime Minister can really restore his authority and get a grip on things on number 10, but on his own kind of reputation.
But there is the organisational issue at number 10 and what's going on in number 10. But wider, and if you look at a lot of Conservative commentators and what they're saying, it's actually the cost of living crisis and how that has been handled, energy policy and how that has been handled, that will actually be the undoing of the Conservative Party, because really, are these Conservative policies? And the answer is not really.
Yeah, well, send us your views, email us on gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet us @gbnews. But coming up after the break, we'll be talking about Northern Ireland and Paul Given's resignation as First Minister. Don't go anywhere.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Well, welcome back to the Political Correction, and your views flooding in at the moment about the energy crisis. Arlene?
Yeah, so Jane says, apart from a mortgage, I've never borrowed money and do not want to borrow £200 from the government. How do I opt out? I do not want debt. Well, I think that's the problem. You can't opt out, and that's something that you were saying, Deanna, earlier on.
Yeah, quite right. Well, David here says, Paul wants energy returned to public ownership. Has he not heard about the 1970s? It was in public ownership and an almighty mess because of that. I'm sure Paul will have something to say about that one when he gets back on camera in a little while.
I'm sure he will too. And Stephen says, does Rishi Sunak think offering a loan to people really helps him? He's so out of touch, it's laughable. I'll not ask you to comment on that.
And I won't be commenting on that. Janice here says they've got to drop green taxes and start saving and getting our own gas, electric, coal and nuclear. Goes back to what we were all saying there, really, about the energy mix.
Yeah, and it's important to have a mix. You can't just rely on one, because then you don't have security. Anne says, when we converted to North Sea gas in the 70s, we were told that there was enough gas in our fields to last the country for 100 years. What has happened to it? Well, it's still there, but policy from governments have changed, not least the Scottish government, of course, who came out against that new field in the North Sea. So that's what happened there, Anne.
Yeah, I think it just seems to be a shame to not be using a natural resource like that. But and then finally, Scott says, I work for an energy company and have done so for the last 14 years, and I've never seen a price increase like this in all the time I've worked in the industry. I have genuine fear at how people will choose between heating and eating going forward, but also have real worry about the abuse that staff will unfortunately get from customers calling in to discuss the price increase, as no one seems to think of the people at the other end of the phone. I think that's something that actually hadn't occurred to me, but is a really fair point there from Scott. So I guess this is a call out from us at GB News that if you are contacting your energy company, just remember the people on the other end of the phone are human too, doing their job and actually facing the same pressures that we all are on this.
Absolutely, and it's important that we do remember this. So thank you for those GB views. So we're going to move on now to Northern Ireland. And Northern Ireland's First Minister, Paul Givan, resigned this week from his position as First Minister as part of the DUP's protest against the Northern Ireland Protocol. Mr Givan described his 8-month tenure in office as the privilege of his lifetime.
Mr Givan's resignation, along with announcements in this week's Levelling Up White Paper, has reopened the discussion around devolution and how much governing autonomy should be bestowed to different parts of the United Kingdom. So what is devolution and how far should localised powers extend? I think, Arlene, we have to come to you first on this one.
So devolution in Scotland and Wales came about. Do you remember the Welsh referendum was very, very close as to whether there should be devolution or not? And of course, Scottish devolution happened after Tony Blair decided it was a good way to try and stem the growth of Scottish nationalism. Unfortunately, it has somewhat backfired in that regard. And devolution in Northern Ireland came about after the Belfast Agreement back in 1998 when the parties came together and we had that historic agreement at that point in time. So the interesting thing about devolution across the regions of the United Kingdom is that it's different in each part of the region. So whilst energy policy is devolved in Northern Ireland, it's certainly not devolved in Scotland. And of course in Scotland they can raise income tax by, I think it's a penny in the pound, and then spend that money how they will. But of course we don't have those powers in Northern Ireland. So there's different types of devolution depending where you are in the United Kingdom. And I think we're going to talk about levelling up later on. But Paul, you will recall Tony Blair's scheme of devolution for Scotland. It has somewhat backfired, has it not?
Well, it has, because as you touched on, Arlene, the whole point of bringing devolution at the turn of the century, as the new Labour government did, was for it really to act as some sort of bulwark against the independence movement. You know, the idea was if we gave people a certain amount of power, then that would assuage them and they would be happy with that and they wouldn't demand full-blown independence. In fact, you know, the law of unintended consequences, what we've seen is the opposite. You know, so some of these devolved areas have clearly got the taste for self-government to a certain degree and want more of it. And I'm a unionist myself, but I suspect the genie may be out of the bottle. I mean, I certainly think that in terms of Scotland, for example, the independence movement there tends to be stronger when there's a Tory government in Westminster because of the strong anti-Tory sentiment that exists across large parts of Scotland. So whether or not that would be tempered in the event of a Labour government again in the future remains to be seen. But I think that the clamour for independence is such. I mean, I know the polls are not particularly decisive at the moment, but I think the movement over recent years is such that there's an argument to say that in the long run it's inevitable. And I think that would be unfortunate because we are stronger as a union, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And of course, the reason why Paul Givan, before we move on to levelling up, resigned was not to do with devolution per se, but of course to do with the implementation of the protocol. Mm-hmm. The DUP have been saying for some time now, I do recall the leader making a speech back in September of last year that if it was a choice between the protocol and the Belfast Agreement, then the institutions would suffer. And here we have that coming through, because he says that when he asked the Prime Minister about the protocol in October, that there was 3 weeks to get it sorted. Mm-hmm. Then, of course, you will recall Lord Frost resigned in and around Christmas. He was the Brexit negotiator dealing with the protocol. And then when Sir Geoffrey asked the Prime Minister earlier on in January what the chances are of getting an agreement on dealing with the protocol with the European Union, he put it at about 20 or 30%. So we shouldn't be surprised that the DUP has taken this action. Both the Belfast Agreement and the protocol are international agreements. Mm-hmm. And so one of them has to give, because they are incompatible at this present moment in time. So there is a real need now to sort out the protocol, because at the minute we have an internal border within the United Kingdom, and that, of course, should not be the case.
Well, can we talk about Article 16? Because this is kind of the buzz phrase that's used at the moment, and this is the thing that can be triggered to try and resolve some of these issues. But can you just explain to us how that works and what it would look like on the ground?
So Article 16 is actually part of the protocol. It was put in there to say if there are societal, economic or environmental damage caused by the protocol to Northern Ireland, then Article 16 could be triggered to call time on the operation of the protocol and find a solution to deal with those problems. We have been willing, I say we, unionists in Northern Ireland have been willing, the United Kingdom government, to pull Article 16 right throughout last year. We thought it was going to happen in October, November time of last year. You'll recall we touched on it then. But unfortunately it didn't. And as a result, the DUP have taken unilateral action. But it's still not too late for our own sovereign government to deal with this matter. And I did notice last week, Diana, in some of the papers, I think it was the Express, 80 of your colleagues had said now was the time to trigger Article 16, and it's long past the time, actually. And
you'll be pleased to know it would have been 81 if I'd realised that letter was going in. So
good.
But anyway, we've just discussed there prior to the protocol about devolution. But of course, we're talking quite a lot at the moment about real localised devolution in England as well. Because this week the government has released its much anticipated levelling up white paper, aiming to ensure that prosperity is shared amongst all regions of the UK.
Of course, this is the flagship strategy, aiming to close the gap between rich and poorer areas by 2030, to improve education, broadband and transport, as well as to delegate more localised powers across England.
Labour have criticised the proposals, saying the ideas lack ambition and funding.
So what is levelling up? A great buzz phrase. And why is the government pushing so hard for it? And what are its prospects for success, Deanna?
I think we could do a whole show on this, couldn't we, really? But we won't put you through that, I promise. Levelling up, I think it means something a little bit different to everyone. But the crux of levelling up is that it shouldn't be fair that if you're growing up in a less affluent part of the country, that you have access to fewer opportunities than someone growing up in a more affluent part of the country. That is the crux of it. And so the government has been pulling together the levelling up white paper to try and flesh that out a bit, to look at the specifics, to look at what areas need to be targeted. So there are a lot. I think in the paper there were 12 key aims, and I've got them printed out somewhere in a sheet over here. I'm not going to run you through all of them, but I think the key ones really to focus on are on education, looking at making sure primary school children achieve the expected standard in reading, writing and maths. There's a 2030 aim on that, and there's been the implementation of 55 education investment areas to try and really focus where outcomes at the moment on education are the weakest. also looking at life expectancy, looking at narrowing the gap between rich and poor, things about people's satisfaction with their town centres, and already the government's been doing quite a lot of work on kind of improving town centres through the Towns Fund and Future High Streets Fund. But the one to me that I find the most interesting, because I'm a massive political geek, is this one about local devolution. Because we've seen it be really successful in different parts of the country. From my perspective, my neighbour in the Tees Valley, Ben Houchin, has been incredibly successful at getting jobs and investment into the Tees Valley. Looking over at Greater Manchester there, we've seen Andy Burnham, again, having great success at improving things like transport in Greater Manchester. So devolution, when it works, can be a real success in kind of improving the prosperity and opportunities in an area. So the government's going to be focusing initially on 9 areas for new devolution deals, of which I'm very pleased to say County Durham is one of them. But I think, devolution in and of itself is a good thing, but it has to go broader than that. It has to be about the opportunities that it brings to people.
Well, devolution works, Deanna, though, when people are all going in the same direction.
Yes.
And I think that's the problem at the minute in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, actually. Because if you're not working together with Westminster and moving in the same direction, then there's this tension, and actually more time is spent dealing with the tensions than actually the good that you can do for your own particular area. Yes. And that is the problem if you're going off in different directions. So it'll work if everybody's pulling together.
Well, that's a real concern for us in County Durham, actually. So we're talking about whether we want an elected mayor or not. My view is no for that very reason, because if you end up with a government and an elected mayor butting heads, I think that can bring about some element of stalemate. So I think you're right, that sort of moving in the same direction. But certainly going to be interesting seeing how this sort of plays out. And Paul, we're very aware we haven't sort of let you in yet. What did you make of the white paper? Do you think it goes far enough?
I think the 12 points are okay as far as they go, but I think the elephant in the room really is the truth is that in order to level up in the way that the government wants, it is going to take very, very serious funding. It is going to take huge amounts of investment. And my concern actually is that the rhetoric isn't backed up by a commitment to funding. I mean, there's limited new money involved, I think. I mean, it's fair to say that some of this money is recycled. And levelling up to me isn't simply about, shiny new buildings or moving certain government departments to other parts of the country or even introducing new mayors. I'm not necessarily against that, but that isn't the be-all and end-all of it. If you look at Germany, for example, when Germany levelled up, it did it as a result of huge investment in the poorer parts of the country, particularly East Germany, where Germany was reunified. So I'm pessimistic, I have to say. I think the rhetoric is good, but I think it isn't matched by the reality.
I think that's a really good point, Paul, and there has certainly been criticism about the kind of investment here. But I think my counter-argument would be it's not always about spending money. Sometimes it's setting up the right framework for private investment as well, which I think is something that sometimes people on your side of the argument sometimes overlook a little bit, that actually getting that business investment in doesn't always take money to do that. It can take changes in regulation or tax regimes.
Yeah, and
I'm not necessarily against that, but there's a danger that it just ends up becoming tinkering at the edges. Get the regulation right, get the framework right, encourage the private sector to flourish, but ultimately, without serious investment, you're not going to revive our industrial base. You're not going to create the sort of infrastructure projects that will bring thousands of new jobs and decent wages, etc. It needs much more than it's being given at the moment, I think, Deanna.
Yeah, and I think it also needs to work in conjunction with the union connectivity review as well, which of course came out finally in terms of its final paper in November of last year and looked at the transport links right across the UK. So that's an important part as well. But coming up after the break, we're taking a look at the controversy surrounding the Winter Olympics in Beijing. So don't go anywhere.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate.
From all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
Make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel.
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Well, welcome back to the Political Correction. And again, your views have been flooding in this morning.
So on the energy crisis, Peter says Sunak's help is not enough and badly targeted. We need a proper energy strategy, and this should have been looked at years ago. We need nuclear, gas exploration, fracking and new oil extraction.
Well, a lot coming in on the energy crisis. We've got Tony here who says if you were to put these advisors on the minimum wage, they would starve because they lack drive and common sense.
And then John says this 23% green tax on energy is simply a tax promoted by middle-class eco-warriors aimed at the poor.
David says the government are not giving anything to deal with the energy price hike. They're simply reducing the potential increase.
And Frank says going green is the correct way to go, but we must convert on a measured way until wind, tidal, etc. can take over. This is the idea of transition, which I actually very much agree with. You can't just switch one off and switch another on. For instance, using our own resources instead of exporting carbon, such as fracking and coal, which would, in a worldwide situation, reduce the carbon caused by importing.
And then we've got a view in there on Brexit as well from Camilla, who says Lord Frost needs to be brought back to solve the Northern Ireland Protocol, or Arlene Foster. Liz Truss has obviously not made an impression on the EU. I think to give Liz some credit, she's not really been had responsibility for that for very long.
Not for very long.
It's been a few weeks.
No.
But we wish her well in trying to tackle some of those issues. Now, the Winter Olympics have commenced in Beijing, taking place from the 4th until the 20th of February, with about 3,000 athletes competing in 109 different events.
The Games are, of course, surrounded by controversy, with countries including the United Kingdom, the United States and Canada all declaring a diplomatic boycott due to China's human rights abuses.
Ian Duncan-Smith, who represents the Interparliamentary Alliance on China, said the Chinese government commits industrial-scale human rights abuses in the Uyghur region and Tibet, and sends near-daily military incursions into Taiwan's airspace. We cannot lend any legitimacy to China's despotic regime. So I suppose the question is the diplomatic boycott the right course of action, and will it actually be in any way effective?
Yeah, well, I think in terms of the coverage back here of the Olympics, it has been very muted. Of course, the opening ceremony was on Friday when Vladimir Putin arrived and was greatly lauded by President Xi. And they then came out with some announcements on Ukraine and Russia. But in terms of the actual games itself, I do feel for our athletes that are out there, this is the pinnacle of their career. And whilst we've never been as close to the Winter Olympics as the Summer Olympics, it's always really good to follow our athletes and see what they're doing. So I do feel for our athletes out there without any diplomatic support. Even Princess Anne didn't travel. And of course, she goes to all of the Olympic events, Sienna.
Yeah, I think she did put out a sort of video message to the athletes, didn't she? But not quite the same. Paul, what are your views? Do you think the diplomatic boycott is the right thing?
Well, I just think, look, you can't really give credence to the whole process of selection, which resulted in Beijing being given the Winter Olympics, and the vote took place. And you took part in that process. And then further down the line, when the event itself is about to begin and all the athletes are in place, all of a sudden there's this big diplomatic storm over the Chinese regime and whether or not it was right to give the Olympics to Beijing in the first place. It seems to me that particular horse has bolted. And I do think I agree with Arlene. I mean, in terms of the athletes who are there, it's unfortunate because all of the coverage is about political issues. Rather than the events themselves, and I certainly have little time for the Chinese regime. But let's not forget also that this is not a one-off. I mean, we're going to be holding a World Cup later this year in Qatar, and Qatar has got a pretty appalling human rights record in some areas as well. But there isn't enough being made about that. So I think the whole thing is riddled with hypocrisy, to be perfectly blunt, and the timing I just think is absurd.
I think it has been interesting seeing how sort of the athletes and actually some of those covering the Olympics have got on. There was a report this morning about a Dutch reporter who was dragged away by Chinese security whilst he was live on air. He was later allowed to continue his piece to camera. But I think that's quite damaging, doesn't it? And does that not say a lot about China and its kind of approach to censorship?
Yeah, absolutely. But I do want to give a shout out to Team GB athletes and to maybe some of their families who are at home watching it on. I was looking up this morning, and the curling mixed doubles, Jen Dodds and Bruce Murat, they are hopefully moving into the semi-final. So you don't know, we might get a medal out of Beijing. Wouldn't that be great? I think we got 5 at the last Winter Olympics, and it would be really good if we could build on that. But of course, part of the issue with the Olympics is it's been used as a platform by China. We had Vladimir Putin arriving and of course, been lauded by President Xi. And Taiwan has condemned the timing of China and Russia's no-limit partnership. The government says the Chinese government is bringing shame to the Winter Olympics, which began on Friday.
Mm-hmm. Well, 1 hour before the Winter Olympics opened, China and Russia backed each other over standoffs on Ukraine and Taiwan. They promised to collaborate together more against the West. Former Pentagon official Elbridge Colby says China and Russia becoming such close allies is an indictment of American statecraft. But joining us now is Dr. Jacob Lassin. He's a postdoctoral fellow at the Malikian Centre for Russian, Eurasian and East European Studies. Dr. Lassin, thank you for joining us. What did you make of the very sort of quick collaboration between President Jinping and President Putin?
You know, it was a very interesting, document to see come out at a very pointed moment. Clearly, it's aimed at the NATO partners, and even though the document itself does not mention Ukraine at all, it's all clearly about issues stemming from what's going on right now in Ukraine, and of course China's longstanding antagonism with the West over Taiwan. And the fact that, as you mentioned, there's been so much of a diplomatic boycott, and that Vladimir Putin was the kind of guest of honor at the opening ceremony, really shows kind of where the Chinese and the Russians want to take this relationship, and how they want to use their relationship as a way of standing together against the West.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of Taiwan's response, realistically, what action can they take in response to this no-limits partnership?
Yeah, I do not think that there's really too many concrete actions that Taiwan can take right now. Aside from strengthening their relationships with Western countries, we've seen the Australian, UK, and US alliance about building nuclear submarines that would be in the Pacific as something that could, help act to defend Taiwan going forward. But really, I don't know if there can be much that Taiwan itself can do, aside from making known their displeasure and trying to get more attention put onto the issue.
And I suppose the other question is, what can NATO do? Because, of course, this coming together, this deep strategic partnership between Russia and China is clearly to send a message to NATO and to say thus far and no further in relation to NATO expansion.
I think the major thing that NATO can do is to make sure that it has a unified response. Having every different country come up with its own response, its own plan of action is just going to make it look weaker. So making sure that NATO remains kind of unified, that NATO is able to speak with one voice, that NATO does not break down based on the different economic and other political considerations of its constituent members, is going to be its best course of action moving forward.
Mm-hmm. That's a very interesting point, of course, because here in the UK we've been disappointed with the reaction from some of the EU states, Jacob, in terms of their slowness to come out and take the line that NATO has been taken. And actually, America had a bit of a rocky start as well. But for you, you're saying that NATO really needs to speak with one voice. That's an important point, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that, having the kind of different responses and being able to kind of pick off countries based on, their own individual concerns has been really beneficial to Putin's larger strategy here. And knowing that, for instance, Germany is really reliant on Russian natural gas and being able to perhaps get a softer response from Germany has been able to bolster Putin's position.
Yeah. And Dr. Lassin, given your read of the current situation with, troops built up on the Ukrainian border and now what looks like the kind of erection of various structures that look like they could be linked to an invasion, how likely do you think an invasion into Ukraine is?
I still don't think a large-scale invasion is the most likely. I think that, at this point, Putin has gotten a lot of the concessions and a lot of the conversation to go in the direction that he wants it to. Where we see that in the next few weeks that President Macron and Chancellor Scholz are going to be visiting Moscow. And the fact that he's been able to get, EU members to come to him and to have these conversations start up again about shared security in Europe, about where NATO is going to be able to have weapon systems and do exercises, has really been able to move the ball really into Russia's court. And as a result, he's been able to get things onto the agenda that NATO and the West haven't been talking about for almost decades now.
Brilliant. Well, Dr. Lassin, thank you so much for your insights on this this really sort of quickly unfolding and fascinating, if slightly worrying situation.
Very worrying, yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And we're going to move on now to the northeast. And a farmer has been cleared by a jury after he defended his property by flipping a car off his land using a tractor.
Robert Hooper argued during his 4-day trial that an Englishman's home is his castle and claimed he had been assaulted before he used a tractor to shift the Vauxhall Corsa from a lane outside his farm in Newbig in County Durham.
Outside Durham Crown Court, Teesdale farmers gathered to support Mr Hooper and cheered as he was cleared of dangerous driving and criminal damage. And joining us to discuss this story is Bob Danby, the manager of Upper Teesdale Agricultural Support Services. Bob.
Well, Bob, thank you so much for joining us. Bob and I have known each other for, 2-3 years now, and I'm really grateful to you for coming on the show. I guess, my first question is, we know that Teesdale had a very busy summer over the past couple of years, but did it become quite a regular occurrence of farmers having their access blocked?
Not really. We noticed a difference in the type of visitors that were coming into Teesdale. The vast majority of visitors are respectful, but over the last 2 years, it suddenly seems to become an alternative Ibiza with the party people coming here.
And how frustrating is it for the farming community when they're kind of unable to access their own land? We can see there the clip of the courser being flipped over the wall and the quite aggressive kind of kickback from the owner of the vehicle.
Yeah, it doesn't happen too often, thankfully. It does cause some inconvenience for the farmers, but the vast majority of the times it happens, it's solved quite amicably. And people quite respectful of the vehicles.
But clearly, this was a case that kind of really rocked Teesdale, and the court case and the trial's been ongoing for a long time now. What did you make of the outcome of the court case?
I think, along with a lot of the other rest of the people, I was really pleased at the outcome. I have a lot of sympathy for the farmer concerned. Can you imagine a moment of madness, if you want to call it that? And then for the next 9 months, your whole life's on hold. You may go to prison. Your business is under threat. Your whole livelihood, your whole lifestyle, the whole way of life is under threat because of what happened there.
Mm-hmm. And do you hope that the outcome of it might kind of make people think twice about not just kind of blocking access onto farmers' land, but also about kind of acting so belligerently if it happened?
I would like to think that it would have an effect, but with the type of business that we've been having in those people, I don't know whether they really think about that. As I say, the vast majority of people who come to visit Teesdale are really respectful and treat the countryside the way it should be treated. Teesdale loves to see those people come here, but if you want to come here and cause problems, then much rather you do that somewhere else.
Mm-hmm. Well, as we know, Teesdale is a beautiful beauty spot, particularly the area concerned near Low Force, and I think we're always grateful for visitors, but as you say, people who treat the area with the respect that it deserves.
Yeah, absolutely.
Brilliant. Well, Bob, thank you so much for joining us this morning. I'll see you when I'm back up next week.
Thank you, bye.
Thank you, Bob. I suppose the big question here, Arlene, is, you know, there has been a lot of reaction to this case, I think particularly given the video footage that we saw on screen there. You know, how much kind of right should people have to be able to defend their own property?
Well, and I'd like to hear what our viewers actually think of this case as well. And if you have views, please do send them in to us so that we can share them with the rest of the public. Yeah, look, as I understand it, this gentleman tried to get the owner of the car to move the car, but he refused to. And we could see from the video footage, became quite belligerent and started to kick the digger and what have you. So I think he probably did try to use other means rather than just going straight out and flipping the car. But I mean, a farmer is there to do his work. He can't get access to his work, and this guy's been belligerent and not moving the car. What else can he do?
Well, I completely agree. I mean, I think it was a really tricky case because no one ever wants to turn to such actions. But, you know, looking at the result of the trial and sort of what's come out since, it does seem as though it was tried to sort of, the farmer tried to sort of fix the situation very amicably. And by the sounds of things, the owner of the car got quite aggressive, and you know, the farmer then claimed that he was actually struck in the face through the tractor window. And I think one of the things that was said in court was, you know, everyone has a plan of action until they're punched in the mouth, which is a Mike Tyson quote. And I think that kind of formed part of his defence. Paul, what did you make of this case? Oh, we can't hear you, Paul. There we go.
I would try again. Very simple. If you trespass on someone else's property and you ignore all reasonable requests to leave, then you can't complain if someone ejects you. It's really straightforward, I think. I just wondered, Deanna, looking at that footage, whether you and your colleagues might get any ideas and take a forklift to Downing Street and eject or that seems to be the way to do it, doesn't it?
Well, certainly no plans to do so that I'm aware of, Paul. But as I said last week, there's no pork pie plot. So I don't know if other people are plotting in other darkened rooms, then maybe that could be a suggestion that we send to you.
I love the way Paul Embry manages to bring it all back again to Downing Street. Well done, Paul. Flipping a Corsa in Durham back to Downing Street. That's brilliant. So we're going to read out some GB views now, which, as I say, have been coming in thick and fast today, particularly on the energy crisis and levelling up. So Phil says, why don't the government call an emergency energy crisis and force the energy companies to freeze the increase in energy prices for 3 months? This is when Jim are reviewing the situation.
So my understanding is that one of the difficulties of the price cap as a kind of policy is that because the prices per unit of energy have been getting so high, the energy companies actually can't afford to sell it at the price that it's currently at without that cap increasing, which is why we've seen, unfortunately, so many of the smaller energy companies actually going under and leading to kind of a lot of people in a slightly precarious situation of not knowing who their supplier is going to be, not knowing what the final bill will look like. So I think that's why, but certainly I think we need to kind of review this and really put in place a really good strategy for tackling it kind of more practically than we have in place now. On levelling up, we've got a lot. Gordon says number one is infrastructure, road, rail and air. Otherwise, no point in better schools as the brightest will still leave and jobs won't come. It's always about the money.
Joan says all that will happen is that the area that shouts the loudest will get the most money. Some areas will lose out. The southwest, for example. So it's interesting to hear areas in the south of the country now get concerned about the fact that they're going to miss out on infrastructure. Yeah, well, I think that's the thing, isn't it? I think people are worried that levelling up will mean for some of those top performing areas it will actually mean levelling down. Alan here said, I voted for Boris to promote Conservative policies and secure our borders, yet neither has happened. Well, keep your views coming in. Coming up after the break, we're joined by a royal commentator to celebrate the Queen's 70th year on the throne. Don't go anywhere.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good morning, you're watching GB News. Coming up this hour on The Political Correction.
Today marks 70 years on the throne for the Queen, and we're joined by a royal commentator to look back on her reign.
Comedian Jimmy Carr is in hot water after a joke in his latest Netflix stand-up special.
And online safety laws are to be strengthened to stamp out illegal content.
That plus plenty more after the latest news.
Good morning, it's 11 o'clock. I'm Olivia Guthrie in the GB newsroom. The Queen says it's her sincere wish that Camilla, Duchess of Cornwall, becomes Queen Consort when Prince Charles becomes King. She made the announcement in her Platinum Jubilee message as she became the first monarch in British history to reach the milestone. Clarence House says Prince Charles and the Duchess of Cornwall are touched and honoured by the gesture. And in the last few minutes, the Prince also congratulated Her Majesty on her service and that her dedication to the country inspires admiration. Meanwhile, Boris Johnson has paid tribute to the Queen as she marks 70 years on the throne today. The Prime Minister praised her sense of duty and what he calls her unwavering dedication to the nation. Questions are being asked about how the Prime Minister's new Chief of Staff will balance his new role with 2 other jobs. Steve Barclay is also an MP and a Cabinet Minister. Boris Johnson also announced the appointment of long-term ally Guto Harry as Director of Communications. It's part of a shake-up at Number 10 after a raft of resignations. American podcaster Joe Rogan has apologised for saying the N-word over a number of years. It follows musicians including Neil Young accusing Rogan's podcast, which is funded by Spotify, of spreading coronavirus misinformation. A number of high-profile artists have removed their music in protest. After a video compilation emerged of Joe Rogan repeatedly using a racial slur, the podcaster said it's regretful and shameful.
My sincere and humble apologies. I wish there was more that I could say, but all of this is just me talking from the bottom of my heart. It makes me sick watching that video, but hopefully at least some of you will accept this and understand where I'm coming from.
Podcaster Joe Rogan there. Culture Secretary Nadine Dorries says the government is looking into new legislation that would hold streaming platforms accountable for offensive content. It's after Jimmy Carr came under fire for what many are calling an abhorrent Holocaust joke on his Netflix special. The comedian, who's not yet responded to criticism, joked about the deaths of thousands of Romani people at the hands of the Nazis. In Morocco, investigators are looking into how a little boy was able to fall into an uncovered well. Rescuers dug for several days to reach 5-year-old Rayan, but he died before emergency services could get to him. He'd fallen over 100 feet, and rescue efforts were hampered due to concerns over landslides. Specialist NHS teams are being brought in to get patients fit for operations in a last-minute bid to avoid cancellations. NHS England say people not being ready due to health problems account for 1/3 of surgery appointments being delayed. Teams of nurses, doctors and care coordinators will help patients prepare for their operations from next year. The chairman of Tesco says food prices are likely to rise 5% by the spring. The supermarket chain says the impact it will have on low-income families is troubling. It follows an announcement by energy regulator Ofgem that UK bills will rise by nearly £700 a year from April. Malcolm Grimston, research fellow at Imperial College, told GB News it's a difficult situation for both customers and energy companies.
I think we need to be very careful with these measures like price caps and like windfall taxes. In the very short term, they look okay, but if they end up meaning that the companies we rely on to invest so prices will come down in the future feel, why should we do that? We had years of making no money. Now we are starting to make money. It's going to be taken away from us. So why should we bother to invest? And I think at that stage, we may well find ourselves in a much worse situation.
Academic Malcolm Grimston. Now, legendary Indian singer Lata Mangeshkar has passed away at the age of 92. The iconic performer died of multiple organ failure at a hospital in Mumbai. She'd been a cultural icon in India for almost 8 decades and was the voice of many Bollywood soundtracks. The country has declared 2 days of national mourning and she'll be given a state funeral. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's get back to the political correction.
Good morning. You're watching GB News. This is the political correction.
We're here for the next hour to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge of the debate. It's not about journalists talking to journalists. It's about you telling us what you think. Coming up this hour.
So today marks 70 years on the throne for the Queen, and we're joined by a royal commentator to look back on her reign.
Comedian Jimmy Carr is in hot water after a joke in his latest Netflix stand-up special.
And online safety laws are to be strengthened to stamp out illegal content.
And we love to hear from you, so please get involved by emailing us on gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet us at gbnews. This is the Political Correction.
So Her Majesty the Queen marks history today, becoming the first monarch in our nation's history to mark 70 years on the throne.
Queen Elizabeth II has had a remarkable reign, serving Great Britain, Northern Ireland and over 2 billion Commonwealth citizens for 7 decades, with her children, grandchildren and, until last year, her beloved husband of 73 years, the Duke of Edinburgh.
Ascending to the throne in 1952, aged just 26, she has seen 14 prime ministers, represented the nation at its best and guided it through its worst, always with the most impeccable stoicism, grace and unwavering duty.
Despite many personal losses, unimaginable burdens and innumerable challenges, Her Majesty the Queen has been the backbone of the nation for the entirety of most Britain's living memory, and her legacy and achievements are simply remarkable.
The Queen last night expressed her desire that Camilla, the Duchess of Cornwall, should be titled Queen Consort when the Prince of Wales ascends to the throne.
But joining us now to discuss Her Majesty's incredible life and legacy is royal commentator Richard Fitzwilliams. Richard, thank you for joining us this morning.
Indeed, an absolutely extraordinary legacy. And Accession Day is a moment in our history which is one of those things that, well, it's quite hard to come to terms with, really. Yeah. Very few people in Britain can remember a period when the Queen was not on the throne.
Yes, and if we can go back, Richard, to that time in 1952, this is always a very sad day for Her Majesty the Queen because she was, of course, very close to her father, and she sees this as the anniversary of his death as well as the anniversary of her ascension to the throne. So she'll be thinking about that today as well, won't she?
She certainly will, and she mentioned this in her statement. She always stays at Sandringham until at least the 6th of February, because it was 70 years ago today that George VI died. This was something of a shock. He had been unwell, though it wasn't widely known how seriously he was ill for some time. But there's no question that this was a period that it was an age of deference. The Queen, 25, ascending to the throne with Churchill as Prime Minister, and also a time, clearly she must be reflecting on her father's remarkable record of service as wartime sovereign. And of course, and she paid tribute to him in her statement, her strength and stay, the Duke of Edinburgh. 73 years, just the most extraordinary partnership of opposites too, because the Queen being somewhat cautious, I think, by nature and conservative, the Duke very sometimes abrasive, always experimenting, dynamic energy, and then the combination of this marking this absolutely amazing partnership for which we all benefited.
Yes, and I always think of that photograph of George VI waving Her Majesty the Queen off on the tour at that particular point in time. Of course, so poignant because they wouldn't see each other again. And getting that news in Kenya, it must have been a complete bolt out of the blue for Her Majesty. She probably thought she had another couple of years to spend in relative anonymity with her new husband of just a couple of years. But it all came to an end that day she got the news, Richard.
Indeed it did, and as you mentioned, this photograph, which has become famous, of a very gaunt, hatless George VI waving goodbye to Princess Elizabeth as she was then, and Prince Philip, who were deputizing for him on a tour that would take them. They first went to Kenya, but then they were going to the Antipodes. Subsequently, he was shooting the day before and then succumbed 7 decades ago. And of course, Churchill, surprised by the news, called it the worst. But an inspiration, because of course he was a shy, stammering naval officer. He never had intended nor wished to have the top job, but of course, owing to the abdication of his brother, Edward VIII, he became, I think, the ideal sovereign, symbolically, as as a royal couple, he and Queen Elizabeth have a very, very special place in the nation's heart. And I think his dedication to duty, from which his health undoubtedly suffered, has inspired the Queen.
Some photographs there of Her Majesty the Queen arriving back, and that's her first time on British soil as the Queen. And you've made reference to the statement, the message, the platinum message that was put out last night by the Queen, Richard. And of course, it did have that message in it that she wanted Camilla to be referred to as Queen. That's a very significant statement by Her Majesty, isn't it?
It's very significant indeed. It's extremely dramatic. This wasn't expected, but it makes perfect sense because this issue hadn't been resolved. I mean, to allow the marriage to take in the circumstances of 2005 between the Prince of Wales and Camilla Parker Bowles, it was necessary to have what can only be called an invention, that one day she would become Princess Consort. There is no historical precedent for that, and it would have actually, I think, needed legislation. So this, in essence, this means that the Queen has personally intervened, and this basically it solves what was something of a dilemma, because if it had been announced when Prince Charles acceded, there would, I think, have been some controversy, certainly in the months before the coronation. So this was ensuring that the succession will be a smooth one at a very difficult time, of course, for the monarchy. I mean, there have been several such periods in the past, but in the last couple of years, and especially with Prince Andrew in disgrace and the Sussexes embittered, there's been a collection of stories that have hit the headlines. I mean, the advantage of being the world's most high-profile monarchy is that when things are going well, as they have for so much of the Queen's reign, of course, the benefits are enormous. When, as they have recently, there have been problems, then, of course, it's the reverse.
And throughout those periods of sort of rockiness in the royal family, the Queen herself has remained a real rock of stability. How do you think the situation will look moving into the future, sort of looking towards the future of the monarchy? Do you think we'll still have that solid reputation on the world stage?
Well, I think that the Queen has always symbolised continuity when there's been so much change, and I think that, and especially during the pandemic too, with her virtual broadcast, which was so superb, but also having a monarch above party politics, I think, is very, very significant, and her constitutional duties to be advised, encourage and warn, read the government speech, audiences with the Prime Minister, then the ability to have a Christmas message. I mean, the Prince Charles one day will take on exactly the same duties. He has an activist streak, and that wouldn't belong in the job which he will one day have the longest Prince of Wales in period in waiting in history. But nonetheless, there's no doubt the Queen's legacy is extraordinary. The Commonwealth, she's more or less single-handedly held it together. And I think the highlight of her reign was the state visit to Ireland, because that put the seal on the Good Friday Agreement and was an enormous success.
And Charles has obviously been very greatly moved by what his mother has done, recognising, of course, that this could have been a difficult moment if it hadn't have been sorted out before she left us. And he has said that he's deeply conscious of the honour for his darling wife to be known as the Queen. That's quite a personal statement, isn't it, from Charles this morning?
It certainly is.
Oh, goodness. I wonder, have we lost Richard? I think... Oh, no, he's back. That's great. Go ahead, Richard.
had been, of course, highly controversial. Looking back over the decades, and you'll notice that the Queen's statement, most particularly, is very optimistic. She's a deeply religious person. She is looking forward to what she sees as a positive future for Britain after difficult times and the pandemic. But if one looks back, of course, with the nightmarish marriage between Charles and Diana and what that led to, and the problems in the 1990s, and then Diana's tragic death and the public's unprecedented response to it, of course, the whole history of this and of his relationship with Camilla, this will undoubtedly excite emotions, but nothing like what it would have done had this been left. So I think that the Queen has very perspicaciously and very positively moved to ensure a smooth succession and deal with the matter now, and also deal with it on a historic day. I mean, she's got 2 more years to beat Louis XIV of France, the Sun King, who ruled for 72 years. So that's the least we could ask of her, because she's yet again mentioned when she was 21, she swore she would serve her whole life, and that vow, we see it again in the statement.
Well, Richard, you mentioned the poignancy of Her Majesty's visit to Ireland, but on a personal level, what is your favourite memory of the Queen sort of throughout her 70 years?
My personal memory, meeting her at the press reception at Buckingham Palace for journalists the eve of the Diamond Jubilee, that was absolutely delightful, and it showed she has such charm, such dignity and such grace, worlds away, I would add, from the Olivia Colman portrayal in The Crown. And also, I think that just the continuity in the various jubilees, just the memory also of so many Christmas messages, and the fact that everyone, all her subjects in Britain and in the Commonwealth, know very well that the Queen would never let them down, and she never has, inspired by the remarkable example of her father, and also the superhuman energy and the support of Prince Philip.
Well, I thought it was incredibly touching, Richard, that she signed off her message, "Your servant, Elizabeth." It was so touching and I think summed up her service and her duty to all of us. I tweeted this morning that we have been very blessed to live through this Elizabethan monarchy, and I very much feel that, and I'm sure everybody does as well. We're very blessed to have her as our sovereign.
Absolutely, and indeed you mentioned the idea of an Elizabethan age. I think that it's still the most popular portrait. Annie Goni's romantic way captured the Queen when she was in garter robes in the 1950s. And Churchill saw this as another Elizabethan age, whereas Elizabeth I and Victoria gave their names to an age. What I think we could say is that the Queen has carved a very special niche in the hearts of people in Britain and in the Commonwealth. There's no one better known in the wider world as a head of state, and indeed, of course, she's the last head of state who's seen service in the Second World War, so she's one of the last remaining links with our finest hour in the Second World War too. Truly remarkable, and she conveyed this so brilliantly in those virtual broadcasts during the pandemic, quoting Dame Vera Lynn so movingly, and then the 75th anniversary of VE Day, and of course she was there herself celebrating outside the palace.
Well, Richard Fitzwilliam, royal commentator there, thank you for joining us on GB News this morning. And do get in touch with us from home. Tell us your favourite memories of the Queen. Perhaps you met her, and we'll get some of those read out on air later. But coming up on the Political Correction, we're talking online safety laws and the Jimmy Carr joke controversy. But first, here's the weather.
And it's windy with some heavy rain clearing southern England, some scattered showers elsewhere. So let's have a look at the detail for you. And for southwest England, early rain and some coastal gales will clear to a mix of sunny spells and showers. It's going to stay windy with highs of 11. Through the morning, London and the southeast will see strong winds and heavy rain clear to sunny spells and scattered showers with highs of 10 Celsius. For Cardiff and South Wales, heavy rain, strong winds, coastal gales. They'll clear through the first part of the morning to leave a blustery day with scattered showers and some sunny spells. Blustery morning too for the West Midlands, with early rain clearing to leave scattered showers. Temperatures about average for the time of year. Will feel colder in the wind though. It is going to be a cold and windy day for northeast England. Scattered showers and sunny spells. Those showers giving a wintry mix of sleet and snow over the high ground. Highs of just 4. For Scotland's central belt, the cold weather continues with scattered showers moving in on blustery winds and giving a mix of rain, sleet and snow. Temperatures rising to just 3. A showery morning for Northern Ireland with some sunny spells in between. Winds will be strong here as well, especially in and around coastal areas. Showers with highs of just 5 Celsius. So remaining windy and showery this afternoon, with the weather improving this evening as the winds ease and the showers fade away.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and every weekday we bring you The Briefing live from 9:30 a.m. The stories, analysis and live debate that you need to hear.
Quite right, Tom, of course.
Was this something that had been considered at all?
Difficult to answer.
Gas-guzzling helicopters circling. Noise is being made here.
Joe Biden walking out.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, Monday to Friday, 9:30 a.m. on GB News.
Join me, Gloria De Piero, Monday to Thursday at noon for The Briefing. We go to the parts of Parliament that you won't see elsewhere. Plus, there's exclusive interviews with MPs from all parties.
But quite often, they paper over the real truth. Why does a working class lad like you join the Tories?
That's a good question.
Don't miss it, Monday to Thursdays at noon on GB News.
Welcome back to The Political Correction. Comedian Jimmy Carr has sparked outrage after a routine about the Holocaust in his latest Netflix stand-up special.
In the controversial routine, Carr makes light of the murders of hundreds of thousands of people from Europe's traveller communities during World War II.
Digital Media, Culture and Sports Secretary Nadine Dorries said the comments were abhorrent, adding that they just shouldn't be on television. So I suppose the question is, did Jimmy Carr go too far? And at what level should there be laws in place to stop this sort of stuff from happening?
Well, I think Paul has a very definitive view in relation to this, Paul.
Yeah, I mean, I just think, look, Netflix has released a series, Jimmy Carr, one of our most un-PC caustic comedians, and the series is called His Dark Material. Frankly, what did people expect? You know, it certainly wasn't going to be your average kind of mainstream end-of-the-pier comedian. This is the type of thing that Jimmy Carr does. And I just think, look, people can become offended by it, fine, but the reality is that comedians make jokes like this, and our job is to determine whether or not we think that the comedian really means the words that they are speaking. Now, I suspect there's probably nobody who truly believes that Jimmy Carr actually meant what he said in that joke. So the choice then is to say, well, do we find it funny or don't we find it funny? If we find it funny, people can laugh. If people don't find it funny, no one is compelling them to laugh. But this idea that you should take offence at what ultimately everybody knows is a joke, I just think is a little bit silly. Now, I don't particularly find the joke funny, I have to say, but context in these matters are hugely important. Other comedians have made jokes about the Holocaust in the past, not least Jewish comedians. You know, Steve Carell in The Office has made jokes about the Holocaust. I think there's a difference between this, for example, and somebody like Bernard Manning. Bernard Manning was an open racist. Bernard Manning was somebody who did believe that black people were inferior. So jokes from Bernard Manning have to be seen through the context of what he was. His jokes, I think, were malicious. With Jimmy Carr, I think it's different. I don't think he meant what he said. I think he was just pushing the envelope, as they say, and our choice is to laugh or not laugh. Beyond that, I don't see it as much as a story, and I don't really see why government ministers are getting involved in something like this. That seems to me to be completely over the top.
Well, linked to that, at the moment, of course, the government's introducing the online safety bill to try and tackle harmful content online. I think one of the key debates to come out of that is where do we draw the line, and who decides what content should and shouldn't be allowed?
Well, I mean, I would draw the line when someone threatens physical violence or threatens violence against a person. I've been campaigning on this as well to try and get the platforms to take action against some of the threats that are seen, not just to public figures, but also to young people, which is something that really does concern me. But to Paul's point about comedy and do you draw a line in comedy, I mean, I didn't find the joke funny. I thought it was quite offensive, actually. But I'm allowed to find it offensive. It doesn't mean that he doesn't have the right to say that. And I think that that's the problem now. People want to actually limit what other people say because you may be offended what I have to say. I might be offended by what you have to say. For me, it only crosses the line when there are threats there in terms of physical violence.
And I think, Paul, that's why your point there about context was so important as well. I think I'm with you, though, Arlene. I think you know, an actual threat online, clearly social media companies and platforms should be taking more action. And I know there's also moves towards things like revenge porn, human trafficking, extremism, and also sites that, you know, help promote suicide. I think we can probably all agree that that sort of content absolutely shouldn't be there because of how harmful it can be. But I think going back to the point about comedy, if someone cracks a joke about something like that, should their tweet be allowed online or not? Yeah, really difficult one, but send us your views. We always want to hear from you, so send us your thoughts. Did Jimmy Carr go too far? Did you watch it? What did you make of his joke if you watched his special online?
So we're going to move now on to the news, and it's 11:30, and it's important that we hear what that is going on. So here's the news now.
It's 11:30. I'm Olivia Guthrie in the GB newsroom. The Queen says it's her sincere wish that Camilla, Duchess of Cornwall, becomes Queen Consort when Prince Charles becomes King. She made the announcement in her Platinum Jubilee message as she became the first monarch in British history to reach the milestone. Clarence House says Prince Charles and the Duchess of Cornwall are touched and honoured by the gesture. The chairman of Tesco says food prices are likely to rise 5% by the spring. The supermarket chain says the impact it will have on low-income families is troubling. It follows an announcement by energy regulator Ofgem that UK bills will rise by nearly £700 a year from April. In Morocco, investigators are looking into how a little boy was able to fall into an uncovered well. Rescuers dug for several days to reach 5-year-old Rayan, but he died before emergency services could get to him. He'd fallen over 100 feet, and rescue efforts were hampered due to concerns over landslides. TV, online and DAB plus radio. This is GB News. Now it's back to the political correction.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate.
From all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel.
Right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Well, welcome back to the Political Correction, and your views have been flooding in. We've got loads today. Arlene.
We have loads. Winter Olympics. Mark says, we all know China is a corrupt country, blah, blah, blah. But the West needs to take a long, hard look at themselves and take note of the division that exists in their countries as it's all crumbling down around us.
Well, Paul has a somewhat similar view. All of this is our Western leaders' fault. They've allowed China and to some extent Russia to infiltrate the West by stealth. When you consider that China has its fingers in everything in the West and all the Russian money sloshing around in this country, just thinking that the rich in this country are to blame, we need to look at the house of frauds very carefully.
There you go. And then Russia, Ukraine. Dave says NATO must not expand its membership to include the Ukraine. If you look at it from Putin's point of view, and that's a great thing about GB News. We're always trying to look at it from the different points of views. The narrative is clearly a threat to Russia. The UK needs to stop interfering and stay neutral like Germany has. Do we never learn? Well, the whole point is that NATO should be working together and then expressing their view as one.
All right, and a few of you got in touch about the farmer who used his tractor to move a car. Sean says we should be like Texas. If you break into someone else's property, the owner can use whatever force they see fit, up to and including lethal force.
Gracious. Michael says, in my opinion, if the farmer has asked politely and on numerous occasions to remove the vehicle from his land, then the farmer is entitled to remove the vehicle from his land.
And Susan says, good for him. I'm sure he's suffered more than the mindless idiots who caused the problem. Too often we have to accept the behaviour of these selfish and thoughtless individuals. So a lot of support there for Mr Hooper.
Yeah, absolutely. And then back again on the energy crisis, which we started the show with today at after 10. Kyle says, I'm amazed that when it is convenient and easy for companies to purchase energy futures and swap against the increase in wholesale prices, that they allow themselves to be subject to the whims of the global market. Very good point. It seems to me that Ofgem needs to be stronger on regulation of energy trading and not just energy supply.
Well, Stuart here says, considering all the money that's been collected by the Green Levy, where has it actually gone? Well, there have been lots of schemes to promote
subsidies,
insulation, lots of subsidies indeed. So I'd imagine on those things, Stuart.
And Janet says, I'm on benefits due to a disability and I'm finding it extremely difficult to put money on my meter. I can't even afford to buy my 3 kids' shoes or buy a big shopping due to continual pressure and putting spare money on my gas and electric. I feel I am letting my family down. Well, Janet, you're not letting your family down. You're trying your best. And thank you for letting us know about your circumstances today.
Absolutely. And I think this is a point that we didn't get to discuss when we talked about this earlier, but the actual hits on energy bills is going to hit people on prepayment meters even harder. Right. It's something that we need to remember. And then finally, Alan says we need a complete rethink on energy. We should be using the vast resources we have for the benefit of all. Nothing should be off the table. It's fine to move towards net zero, but it cannot be at the expense of the nation. Well, Alan, on that, I think we're probably in complete agreement.
OK, so we're going to move on now. And every week, as you know, we like to bring on someone who may not agree totally with everything that myself, Paul, and even Deanna has to say. But in Common Ground, we discuss the issues and social ideas that bring our country together. And so for today's Common Ground, joining us is Father Nadim Nazair. And thank you so much, Nadim, for joining us. And you want to kick off with the big news of today, which, of course, is the Platinum Jubilee.
Thank you very much, both of you, and it's a pleasure to be with you this morning. And yes, because I had the pleasure to be invited by Her Majesty the Queen to celebrate her 90th birthday to Windsor Castle. So I even had the honor to stay overnight there and had dinner with the Queen. And I want to say how impressed I was with her kindness and gentleness and engagement. So I come from Syria and I'm the director of the Awareness Foundation. So she asked about the foundation, she asked about Syria. She was so concerned and we had a wonderful chat. And in this fantastic Jubilee, I want to send her on behalf of my church and the foundation our love and best wishes. And today, actually, during Mass, we said a prayer for Her Majesty. And we said, vouchsafe so to bless thy servant, our Queen, that under her this nation may be wisely governed, and thy church may serve thee in all godly quietness, and grant that she, being devoted to thee with her whole heart and persevering in good works unto the end, may the guidance come to thine everlasting kingdom through Christ our Lord. And this special prayer was for the Queen this morning during our Mass.
And Father, she has never made any secret of her Christian beliefs, and she always references them in her Christmas message. And she very much is a servant leader. Isn't that the way she likes to be seen? Someone who is serving the nation, but leading us in a Christian, quiet way. And for that, she gets the dedication and love of so many people.
That's very true, and if you see when she sends the nation a letter, she signs "Your humble Queen." So this humility is real, and I saw it in her face, in her eyes, the way she welcomed us, In person, she is a beautiful person, beautiful human being. And also, we have as a foundation a royal patron, Her Royal Highness the Countess of Wessex, who is also a fantastic lady who has helped the foundation and our good cause in supporting young people and children in war zones. She has always cared for us, and we walked to her home. She opened her home for us, and I think royalty can be an incredible richness to our nation.
And it's lovely to hear.
And I have every support and love for Her Majesty.
And it's lovely to hear the work that goes on in the background as well, Father. So your second story is about the impact of the pandemic on the church.
Yes, actually, it has impacted everybody, and I see that in within the families that come to church, and especially now the impact of the cost of living. It is really creating a huge pressure on everybody, and especially people who have lost loved ones. Some people lost their jobs. The pressure is visible. I can see it in the church, and I want to say to the government and to our parliament, of course we understand the pressure of the pandemic, but also the people are reaching to a breaking point that we need to be aware of. The pressure is mounting, and this is our duty as leaders to highlight and to point at with love and with respect to everything that is going on at the moment.
Have you found that, given the sort of difficulties of the pandemic, but also, very real concerns people have about the cost of living, that this has actually brought your kind of community together, and that people are going further out of their way to really help their neighbours and loved ones?
That's very true, actually. People are more sensitive to the needs of others. This is the Christian faith all about, is to put the needs of others before my needs. I know this is a very high principle, but we strive, we try to live up to those principles. I know also that we will never achieve fully those principles, but when you are under pressure, you start reaching out to those who are in more need than yourself. And you see the community coming together. You see the spirit of the community, the spirit of help and care and asking, and what can we do to do more? What can we do to serve more the community? This spirit is really high at the moment.
Mm-hmm. And have there been any sort of individuals within your own congregation who you feel have really gone above and beyond in the last few years? There are individuals in my community that are in need, and there are individuals who are extremely generous. This combination, God created us so different, and thank God we are different. I was listening to you talking about the humor and the impact on that on our society. I thank God for the English humor. I am not English, but I think if we lose this lightheartedness of the English humor, we lose a lot. And people come together to help each other, generosity, hospitality, lightheartedness in a wonderful humor. This is very, very much the essence of our communities in this country. I have been here for 25 years, and I grew to appreciate the English style of life, the British values, the way that we are different, and we learn from each other all the time. And the generosity of the people continue to touch my heart deeply.
And you've also wanted to talk about, and we've leached a little bit into this, the cost of living and the impact that it is having on the community that you live and work with. It is having a big impact, is it not, Father Nadeem?
It has had a big impact. Plus, please, I don't want to repeat all the cliches about what happened in 10 Downing Street, but I want to highlight also that the people are upset. The people are deeply hit by what happened there, and we can't just ignore it. I lost my personal assistant in the foundation for 15 years. We were brothers, and we worked so closely, and I couldn't go to his funeral. Yeah. I couldn't see him in the hospital. He was my brother for 15 years. So, and many stories you hear around that. To hear that our Prime Minister saying, I took full responsibility, which is great, but then nothing happens. What happens to this responsibility? What the cost of living is hitting us. The death is everywhere. We all have lost loved ones. So I want to ask the Prime Minister, what do you mean by I take full responsibility? In the church, when I say I take full responsibility, it means that should followed by actions. And until now, we have seen no actions. And all in the under the name of, well, there are inquiries, police inquiries. But please, don't insult our intelligence, Prime Minister. There are things beyond inquiries. Very simple. People need peace in our government, that we can live in peace also. It is hitting us from everywhere. The pandemic, the cost of living, the government is in a mess. We need to know where we are in this difficult time. It is a difficult time, and we pray God that He would give us His peace in our hearts, which is very important.
Well, Father, I just want to say, as a Conservative MP, thank you so much for sharing your own awful experience there. And I'm not sure if any ministers will be watching this morning, but I'll make sure it's sort of brought to their attention just to show the sort of strength of feeling, not just in your community, but right across the country on this issue.
Father, thank you for joining us this morning. When you were speaking there, I brought to mind a prayer that we use in the Church of Ireland, which is about the Queen and praying for the Queen. We say that we may be under her quietly governed, and I think that's what we all wish for in the coming year. So thank you for joining us from your beautiful church this morning.
Thank you very much from St. Mary Magdalene, Wandsworth Common. And we send from here a lot of love to all of you.
And back to you.
Thank you, Father. Now, our final story of the morning. A college of the University of Cambridge has sparked controversy this week by voting not to fly the LGBT rainbow flag to mark the start of LGBT plus History Month, taking it down after just one day.
Gonville and Keys College said that whilst it was committed to ending discrimination, flying the flag may be divisive, as it could appear to be a political statement.
The college says its own flag is a symbol which unites all in the Keys community, but LGBT students and organisations say they feel betrayed and bitterly disappointed at the decision. Well, joining us now is the human rights campaigner Peter Tatchell. Peter, what did you make of this incredible story this week?
Well, I was surprised because I would have thought that Gonville and Keys would like to respect the wishes of its students, and it appears the students wanted the rainbow flag to be flied. They're saying that it's political, but from the students' point of view and from my point of view, the rainbow flag is not political, it's a human rights cause. Under the Equality Act 2010, it is recognised in British law that LGBT plus rights are human rights. So this decision, I think, is petty and unnecessary and leaves us our taste in the mouth.
Mm-hmm. Well, I completely agree with you, Peter, on the sense that this is a flag representing human rights, representing that, LGBT people should be treated with equality and fairness. But why then do you think this decision was made in Cambridge?
Well, they're saying that they want to avoid any issues of political partiality or neutrality. They wanted to make sure that the college was not associated with political movements. They also said that it would avoid the issue of having to fly lots of different flags on different days of the year. Well, of course, I don't think flying the rainbow flag should be compulsory. That should be a voluntary decision by the college, in particular, listening to its own students. But if the occasion arose that other flags wish to be flown, then they should be assessed on an individual basis. So I wouldn't, object to the United Nations flag being flown on United Nations Day to symbolise our commitment to global solidarity, cooperation, and human rights. But obviously, the organisations that want their flags to be flown, I think they should pay for them rather than the college having to pay for them.
Do you think there is a sort of sense at the moment that kind of flags in general are becoming more and more political or are getting politicised?
Well, of course, that's some people's view. And of course, there are some flags which, are definitely political. So a political party flag is definitely political. Maybe a flag for or against Brexit would be political. But I think something like the rights of women, LGBT plus people, black and ethnic minority people, these are human rights issues. And I would have thought that most people in British society today would welcome the idea of showing solidarity and commitment to ensure that we are a truly inclusive society. And if flying a flag is one way to do that, then why not?
And what has been the reaction of students at these colleges, particularly those involved in perhaps the LGBT societies?
Well, what I've heard and what has been reported in the press, most students are very unhappy. In fact, I haven't seen any students applauding the decision of council of the college. They feel it is a slight to the LGBT plus community, and February is, after all, LGBT plus History Month. The students are not happy. They don't understand why permission can be given to fly the flag one day and then be removed the next. Mm-hmm. And it does appear that the master and staff of the college support the flying of the rainbow flag, but the council, which is the overriding legal body of the college, decided against. So there seems to be a clear split between the council and the master and the staff and students.
And based on kind of experience of other sort of similar incidents, do you think that the kickback from students will be enough to overturn this decision?
I think it's really hard to say. I mean, the council took their decision knowing that the decision to fly the flag had support among staff, students, and I believe the master of the college as well. So I think a lot of students will be, not only just appalled, but concerned that, in fact, the council is not listening to the staff and students. And I think that, a council of anybody, the management body of anybody, has a duty to listen to those who are affected by its decision. And quite clearly, this has not happened in the case of Gonville and Keys.
Mm-hmm. Well, Peter, thank you for joining us this morning to discuss the issue at two Cambridge colleges around the rainbow flag being flown. Peter Tatchell there, human rights and LGBT campaigner. We've had quite a jam-packed show today, Arlene, haven't we?
We certainly have.
There's one question I have for you, though.
Oh, right, OK.
So I clearly you've met the Queen on a number of occasions.
Yes.
I don't expect you to reveal what happened in those conversations because they're private, but how did you feel?
Well, as a huge monarchist, it was a tremendous honour. I thought it was lovely to hear from Father Nadeem there about his experience of meeting the Queen and the fact that he felt that she was such a humble person, that she was a servant leader, and that's the way I felt as well. Somebody who was very well briefed, knew exactly what we were going to talk about, but who was very interested in everything that was happening in Northern Ireland at that time. She is, to me, the absolute exemplar leader in the world today. I mean, I have to say she's somebody that we should all admire and look up to, because she embodies that sort of duty and respect that maybe is a bit old-fashioned nowadays, but actually it works for me.
And Paul, just to bring you in on this, have you ever had the honour of meeting the Queen or any of the royals?
I can't say I have, and they've never had the honour of meeting me. So, but I mean, look, I'm a Republican, not a particularly enthusiastic one, but you know, I respect what the Queen has done. If you are going to have a monarchy, and if you're going to have a monarch, then she has provided, I think, a model for how it should be done. Not many people, frankly, are working at 95 years of age or whatever it is, doing what she's doing. So you know, you can admire her, as I do, without necessarily subscribing to the institution of monarchy.
Yeah, no, I think that's right, and I think, you know, it's probably a concern for some about the future of the monarchy in that sense, isn't it? But anyway, we're celebrating the Queen's 70 years.
We certainly are, and long may she reign. Long may she reign.
More years to come. Well, thank you for joining us on the show today. Thank you for sending us your views. We've had all kinds, a whole range of views coming in. But stay with us, because up next is Alistair Stewart and friends. But of course, we will be back here next week discussing all of the stories that are affecting us right around the country.
And we want to hear from you, whether you're in Northern Ireland, Scotland, England or Wales. Let us know what your views are on the political correction.
See you next week.
And it's windy with some heavy rain clearing southern England, some scattered showers elsewhere. So let's have a look at the detail for you. And for southwest England, early rain and some coastal gales will clear to a mix of sunny spells and showers. It's going to stay windy with highs of 11. Through the morning, London and the southeast will see strong winds and heavy rain clear to sunny spells and scattered showers with highs of 10 Celsius. For Cardiff and South Wales, heavy rain, strong winds, coastal gales. They'll clear through the first part of the morning to leave a blustery day with scattered showers and some sunny spells. Blustery morning too for the West Midlands, with early rain clearing to leave scattered showers. Temperatures about average for the time of year. Will feel colder in the wind though. It is going to be a cold and windy day for northeast England. Scattered showers and sunny spells. Those showers giving a wintry mix of sleet and snow over the high ground. Highs of just 4. For Scotland's central belt, the cold weather continues with scattered showers moving in on blustery winds and giving a mix of rain, sleet and snow. Temperatures rising to just 3. A showery morning for Northern Ireland with some sunny spells in between. Winds will be strong here as well, especially in and around coastal areas. Showers with highs of just 5 Celsius. So remaining windy and showery this afternoon, with the weather improving this evening as the winds ease and the showers fade away.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion.